Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to OCD Recovery's YouTube channel. I am going to talk about my journey with sensory motor OCD, specifically how it latched to saliva and swallowing. But it's also important to remember it doesn't really matter if it's breathing, swallowing, blinking, your heartbeat, whatever it may be. The only thing that's keeping it stuck is the fear of it being stuck forever, you noticing it for the rest of your life, and it going on like that. So we don't actually have to do any direct exposures to our sensations because we're going to notice them forever. I'm going to go into basically this video, in my opinion, the don'ts when it comes to sensory motor recovery. And I work with a lot of sensory motor sufferers coming out the other side from really severe sensory motor, how it took over my life and all that. So before I go any further, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, comment down below, let me know if there's anything you think I'm missing or you want to see me cover. Well, this will be specifically to saliva and swallowing. Those are the sensations that I really struggle with, but it is important because many of you will watch this and think, well, he didn't have breathing, so he can't help me. Sensory motor is sensory motor. The sensation is absolutely irrelevant. It's irrelevant. It does not matter if it's breathing, blinking, your heartbeat, hyper-awareness of your consciousness, hyper-awareness of your thoughts, hyper-awareness of your body movements, your thumbs, your bridge of your nose, your jaw, your TMJ. It doesn't matter what it is. It all comes down to fear and conditional life acceptance. So, my name is Nick. I'm from New Jersey. If you haven't watched my videos before, I was born and raised in Jersey. I grew up at the Jersey Shore a lot during the summers. I worked on the boardwalk. I worked with the cast from the Jersey Shore for multiple seasons. A lot of people like that story. And at the time, I actually had a buddy who was becoming really famous on YouTube as well. So this is like a really weird culture that I was in for 3 years, which really wasn't healthy because it was extremely materialistic. But I always enjoyed physical comfort. I never enjoyed not being comfortable. I always wanted things to be perfect and feel right. I didn't like when I had to do anything tough, physically tough. I didn't like when I had to do anything that was outside of my schedule. And then what happened was when I was in grad school, I lost my father to cancer. Then I lost my aunt. So my mom lost her husband and her only sibling. And then my mom lost her dog. We lost our dog that I had for 10 years. And what had happened was, I was in grad school when all this happened, and I never talked about anything, and I buried everything, coming from my father, who was full Italian, and very much, didn't talk about his emotions. We never said I loved you. I remember the only time we said I love you to each other was right before he died. He was in hospice, and it was brutal. If you ever know anyone who dies of, well, any cancer that you're dying of is brutal, but pancreatic cancer is especially brutal because there's a very low survival rate. I mean, the 5-year survival rate's under 3% or 5%. It's pretty rough. So, and then I got hyper aware of my blinking. I had a panic attack. Well, before that, I had 3 months of tinnitus. Same thing. Tinnitus is the exact same recovery of sensory motor. And the other names for sensory motor are hyper awareness, somatic OCD, sensory motor OCD, neutral obsessions, and stuff like that. But none of those terminologies matter. The problem that we have right now in society is we have terms for everything. We really want to move away from a lot of these terms and just say, what are you scared of? I am scared of loud sounds. I am scared of ringing in my ear. I am scared of this. And then why are you scared? And what is your worst case scenario? I always tell people the terminologies that we see in research studies, the terminologies we see on doctor websites, they're not for the patient and they're not for the person that's working. They're for providers talking among providers. So they really can confuse people, and you don't need to know any of those terms. All you need to know is you have a sensation, saliva and swallowing was mine, that you were afraid of noticing for the rest of your life. If you notice this for the rest of your life will be ruined. So, along my sensory motor recovery journey, I had extreme amounts of panic for years. I was in the mental hospital. Most people will not end up in the mental hospital, but I did not know what to do. If I would have known, even if I would have known Rob for 25 days, still not feeling any better, I would have known not to go. There's nothing wrong with going to the mental hospital in theory. It's just a lot of times we go for reassurance because we want to be safe. They throw medications at us because that's what they do to stabilize us, and then we go home after 72 hours or whatever it is. But 99% of people do not need to go to a mental hospital, in my opinion. And 99% of people do not need to leave work, in my opinion. We have a society that's so hyper obsessed about, oh, wait till you feel better, wait till you're comfort. This is all new stuff. No one thought like this 50 years ago and below. from 1980 and below, it was just you did shit. And although some people are trying to argue that's not the best thing to do, it is part of the best thing to do when it comes to any sensory motor, any OCD recovery journey. So there is no better time to go back to your life, and that's a job or anything like that. So let's start with the biggest don't. The biggest misconception in sensory motor that I see pretty much every day, whether it's people that are DMing me or messaging me or commenting on my YouTube videos or my personal Instagram, a guy who hikes, which is connected with Rob's, because we both talk about the same stuff, is that we need to expose ourselves to our sensation. Now, the reason why this is a misconception and it keeps many OCD sufferers stuck is the magic word is habituation. If I just go back to habituating, I'll never notice my saliva and I'll never notice my swallowing sensations again. But that is a false reality, because you have been swallowing and saliva has been pooling in your mouth for your entire life, eating spicy foods, choking on something. The only reason you're hyper aware right now is because a fear cycle has started, because there's probably a biological genetic component. That's all we need to know with OCD. I always tell people a really funny story. They say OCD isn't biological, and I say, I say, well, if that's the case, OCD is a fear disorder based off irrational beliefs. And last time I checked, humans are highly irrational. So if it wasn't biological in nature, every single person on the planet would have severe OCD, because every single person on the planet is severely irrational in many different ways. Even people, the most calmest Buddhist monks, in my opinion, can be irrational in their compulsiveness use of what they're doing, which I've fallen into many times. I'm compulsive in many ways, or I was. And as I'm a human being fallible, I can still catch myself. So let's take saliva and swallowing. People will say, well, why don't you meditate 20 minutes a day to your saliva? There is a time and place in the very beginning to kind of bring down that fear when you're doing everything you can to avoid that. But after a while, that won't work, because it's not the genesis of why you're scared. As I always tell people with every single fear, the worst case scenario is why you're scared. So if you look at sensory motor, the worst case scenario is, if I notice this for the rest of my life is ruined. And if my life is ruined, it shouldn't be the way that I planned it to be. You know, when we wake up in the morning, we have an idea of how our day is going to go. We wake up and we have an idea, whether it's work, finances, family, religion, and we just have this is how my day is supposed to go. And if anything goes wrong, people, especially with OCD, automatically jump to being overwhelmed. I can't do that, and so forth. Excuse me, a little bit too much peanut butter. And that's what happens. But the reality is, we don't actually need to expose ourselves to any of these sensations, because you will swallow and you will salivate and you will blink and breathe and your heart will beat until the day you die. So if you have contamination OCD and you need a hierarchy of outward exposures, this is a little bit different, because you're avoiding something flat out. Now, the second misconception that ties into this about sensory motor is that once you habituate to it, this ties directly in, that you just will never notice it again. But again, the goal is to not notice your sensations. So if you're trying to go through sensory motor recovery and you're working with someone who's telling you the goal is to never notice these sensations again and habituate to it, this is a really big misconception. I promise you, you're not going to make much progress, because that's not why you're stuck. The reason why we're stuck, again, I'll say it multiple times, is conditional life acceptance and fear of fear. If I notice this for the rest of my life is ruined. And that way I want to go back to not noticing it, which is not true. You did notice it before from time to time, but the fear cycle wasn't there. You know, whether you had something stuck in your eye from an eyelash, whether you were exercising and noticed your breathing, you had never had a point in your life where you didn't notice your sensations before this ever. That's not what's going on. So a lot of the people who talk about sensory motor really have a very poor understanding of it, because it doesn't operate like any other fear. Now, that doesn't mean it makes it any more difficult to recover. OCD is OCD. There's a fear, there's a worst case scenario. In the worst case scenario, if I notice this for the rest of my life is ruined. Once I brought that down and realized that I could go my entire life whilst noticing my sensations, which I wouldn't have liked at all, because agreement doesn't mean acceptance, then I could live my life, even if it was there. Now, the third thing I want to talk about is self-reassuring statements. I've read lots of articles and watched lots of YouTube videos. That way I could see what things people are doing wrong. And I talk to you in the video of what I think. So this is the biggest reassuring statement. It's okay. Everyone salivates. Everyone swallows. Everyone breathes. Everyone blinks. Correct. That's a true, that's fact. That's a factual statement. All living human beings do those normal functions. But that's not why you're stuck. Again, you're stuck because you're afraid you're going to notice it. I'm going to notice my saliva sensation forever. So walking around all day saying to yourself it's okay to perform this is actually a major reassuring statement. Major reassuring statement. And I understand that some people might be telling you to do this, but I can promise you right now it's leading you in the wrong direction. And we'll remember too, OCD is not easy to understand. It's very, very difficult to understand unless you've really experienced chronic OCD. There's a major difference between mild OCD and chronic OCD. A lot of the people that talk about sensory motor, I do not believe suffered chronically, and the point to where their entire life was debilitated. Because a lot of the techniques that people are using are self-reassuring statements, and then they're staying in a coasting phase. If you have chronic OCD, you will not be able to recover long-term with a robust recovery without a deep meaning of unconditional self-life other acceptance, a deep meaning of accepting your worst case scenario, which for us is, if I notice my sensation for the rest of my life will be ruined. So direct exposures to your sensation not being needed, self-reassuring statements not needed, especially because they're very compulsive. And, in the sensory moment, my dogs are looking at me through it. Milo is just like, will you please let me out? I just want to be out there and be friends with you and put holes in the ground and grass while I have to film again and then all this other stuff because he loves to do that. So, sensory motor was my life for 2-3 years. Everything I did, I wasn't going to work. I stopped going to the gym. I was super compulsive about chewing on things like bottle caps or ice cubes to distract myself. Anything I could do to distract myself from my sensations, I was performing. And that was really a bad thing because it was keeping me very much stuck. So those are my biggest don'ts when it comes to sensory motor recovery. What you really want to do is you want to allow yourself to experience the sensations for as long as they need to be there. That means you're breathing, you're blinking, you're swallowing, your saliva. And then this breaks over into all sensations, whether it's tinnitus, whether it's temperature sensations. I don't like being outside in the heat. It's too much. There goes a jet. I live right by, I live by the United States Military Air Force Academy. I live by two other Air Force bases. I have another full-blown airport, Colorado Springs Airport. So I have planes and fighter jets all the time going over. When the fighter jets go over, it's cool. It's really cool. They're so insanely loud. But you want to break down the fear of noticing your sensation for the rest of your life. Right now, I'm confident that if my sensation came back right now and stayed with me forever, that would suck. That would suck really badly, but I could learn to live my life as best as I could. There's no other way to say it. That's the genesis of the fear cycle with any sensation. If I notice this forever, my life is ruined. This isn't fair. I don't deserve this. You have to break that down. Thank you so much for watching. If there's anything else you want to see me talk about, comment down below, and then we'll go from there. We have a lot of good webinars coming up. I always talk about the webinars now in every video. We have ROCD coming up, sensory motor. We, on August 8th or 9th, we just actually booked in, I think it was August 16th, financial anxiety webinar, which is going to be really cool. We're going to talk about financial stress. A lot of people don't even realize, OCD or not, come to that one. That's going to be a great one. We're going to break down all sorts of fears around money, especially in modern day world, social media, everyone flaunting Ferraris and Lamborghinis that they can't really afford. None of that matters. What matters is the belief that we have about money. So if you're interested in any of the webinars, email phil@ocdrecovery.com. Again, that's phil@ocdrecovery.com, and just ask for some information on them. And we have one every week. Eventually, the bigger the company gets, we'll have 2 every week. And then we'll have multiple part series because some of the topics are really in depth. If you have ROCD and HOCD, there's so many different ways that could stick. False memory, real event could be a 10-part series because there's so many intricate ways it will convince you if that did happen, did it not happen, and stuff like that. So as always, have a great day.